Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started with the first episode of IFTF's Metaverse Perspective series in just a moment. Please, as you join in, please add yourself to the chat. Introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from. I see somebody put their introduction in the Q&A. So the Q&A is for questions and answers. We'll be getting to that later. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, we got Dylan from Halifax, UK, Bangkok, France, Scotland, Sweden, Mexico, Spain, New Hampshire, Alabama, Australia, Copenhagen. This is great. Very international group here today. Okay, so just in a moment, we're going to get started. I think we've gotten a good number of folks. We have over, let's see, fantastic. Oakland, the Netherlands, Ukraine. Fantastic. Mike Liebold from Half Moon Bay. Hi, Mike. Okay, I think we should get started since we a little bit getting started a little bit late here today. Fade out our welcoming music. Okay, so welcome everyone. We're going to get started, and welcome to IFTF's first episode of the Metaverse Perspective series. Today we're going to be hearing some forecasts from some previous forecasts from the proto-metaverse with Bob Johansen, and we also have a very special guest, the CEO of the Metaverse, Bruno Larval. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom right now, but just to remind you, we have the chat where you can be having your side conversation, and we're going to be posting a bunch of links that might be relevant to what we're talking about. And also we're going to have, we have the Q&A button. You can find this little Q&A button. We'll be able to grab your questions there. Best to put your Q&A questions in there so that we can find them easily and they don't disappear. And also it can allow people to upvote those questions. And this is a webinar today, so you'll all be muted and your videos are turned off. Just to introduce myself, I'm Toshi Hu. I'm the director of IFTF's Emerging Media Lab, where we're focusing on looking at the future of communication, collaboration, and human connection, kind of carrying on an IFTF's long tradition of doing such. We've been looking at virtual reality for the last 5 years since the lab started. Now, of course, IFTF's been looking at VR for many, many more years. But like many things were once just forecasts and science fiction, we're now needing to engage with these practical realities that are coming about. Our lab has been putting a special focus on looking at collaboration, VR as a collaboration space, particularly for seeing how we can use embodied collaboration space. This is a project we produced, a prototype with Cisco's HR Innovation Lab called ONVR. It's a virtual reality data visualization collaboration space. And again, carrying on an IFTF's long tradition of if the signal isn't out there, perhaps we need to create it. So the metaverse, what is it? Well, this entire series is going to be exploring that idea, but I thought I'd seed a couple things before we get started with the conversation, just to give people some reference. Obviously, there's a lot of hype and buzz and a lot of questions right now. I'm curious about what is the metaverse? So I'm going to share just a couple thoughts. First of all, the metaverse doesn't fully exist yet. This is something that it's a concept now that people are imagining and forecasting around and attempting to create. But it's going to take a bit of time, but it's a concept that was kind of pointing us in the direction. Kind of similar to, you might remember, for some of you, the information superhighway. One of the ways we talked about the internet, maybe similar to that, we would actually be calling this the metaverse in a couple of years, the same way a few of us talk about the information superhighway. Maybe in some ways, as a concept, it might be even more akin to the World Wide Web, which was, when a layer of the internet came about that allowed it to be much more accessible and understandable to people, and really use this idea that it was going to be lots of locations and addresses that made sense to people. And a real simple idea that I think is really important is this idea that the metaverse is a place. One of our favorite XR labs based here in Oakland, Dynamic Land, has this concept of that the computer of the future is not a product, but a place, and a place that we're going to be going into. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into what the metaverse might be, Matthew Ball has a pretty amazing metaverse primer, and we'll put the link in for that. This is a 9-part series in which he outlines an entire framework for the metaverse. It's quite comprehensive, but his kind of a very brief version of what the metaverse is the metaverse is a massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D worlds, which can be experienced synchronously and persistently by an effectively unlimited number of users. Again, this is something that doesn't exist yet, but is something that people are working towards. Another great resource and kind of one of the part of the metaverse canon, I would say, is Tony Parisi, who's been working on the concept of the metaverse and VR for many years. He has a very excellent Medium post, The 7 Rules of the Metaverse. And his rule number 7 is just reminding us that the metaverse is actually the internet. And so that's one of the concepts here that I think is really important, that the metaverse is really an evolution of the internet. It's an extension of the internet. And of course, the internet itself has been being developed for the last 50 years and has had many twists and turns and booms and busts as well. And the metaverse is going to take similarly a long time to emerge, even though there's a lot of excitement and innovation happening right here. And our own co-founder, Roy Amara, has his famous Amara's Law that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term and underestimate the effect in the long term. And of course, IFTF's real focus is really on long-term futures. So that's part of the perspective we're trying to offer today. And just for some of you may not know that the internet was initially called the ARPANET. So we like to kind of think of the ARPANET as the proto metaverse. And this is when there was just a couple nodes on there. And IFTF's history kind of tracks very closely to the creation of the internet and actually has been intertwined with trying to understand and forecast what the internet is about. We've been forecasting the internet for many decades. This is just 3 of many, many publications and incredible reports and projects and prototypes that IFTF has created over the years. And we were founded in 1968. So in 2018, we did a 50-year retrospective and looking back at all of our time, basically forecasting the internet. And for those of you familiar with IFTF's Foresight Essentials Toolkit, one of our main tools is called Looking Back to Look Forward. And this is a tool that allows us to get historical context to try to better understand possible things that could happen in the future and what the twists and turns and timeframes might look like. And to help us do that today, we have our very special guest, Bob Johansen. Bob joined IFTF back in 1973, the year I was born. He was actually president of IFTF from 1996 to 2004. He's now a distinguished fellow and also one of our lead researchers, author of many books. And he has the unique distinction of being somebody who's been forecasting the future of the internet for almost 50 years. So I'd like to invite Bob up. I'm going to stop my screen share right now. And let's see. Bob, welcome.
Hi, Toshi.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to be able to talk with you both about the future and your past work, thinking about the future. I'm wondering if you could just start by talking to us tell us a little bit of a history lesson here in terms of, how the internet started with the ARPANET and what IFTF's kind of relationship was to that at the time.
Sure. So the internet technically began in 1968. It was classified at the time, and DARPA, now the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, was called ARPA without the defense part, and they funded the original network. And that started in 68. It was publicly introduced in 1972. And that was my first professional paper. I had just finished my PhD at Northwestern, and with a computer science graduate student, Jim Schuyler, I did a paper on person-to-person communication. And it was introduced in 1972 at the Washington Hilton. And on the panel was another researcher, Andy Lipinski from Institute for the Future. And that's what led me to come to the Institute. And another person, the chair of the panel, was actually Doug Engelbart, the guy who invented the mouse, invented Windows and a lot of what we still think of as the future. And it was so interesting. I wouldn't have been there except I misunderstood the title of the conference. It was called the International Conference on Computer Communication. And I thought that meant people communicating with people. In fact, the early ARPANET was about computers communicating with computers. But there was 5 others that misunderstood the title of the conference, including Doug and Andy Lipinski. And that kind of led to our early work at Institute for the Future to try to make sense of this, what was then a kind of blob on the horizon.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's something we've been looking at in terms of the evolution of VR, this idea that right now it's mostly solo experiences where people are just interacting with machines and computers, but the real kind of watershed moment is going to be this social VR transformation. And we saw that with personal computing as well,
right?
When people were able to actually able to communicate with each other. So could you talk a little bit about kind of what was the ARPANET like, and how was it? Talk about your kind of the forecasting. I understand you were one of the first social scientists to be looking at what the internet might mean in the future, and you were joined by many of computer scientists who were working on the ARPANET at IFTF. But you were one of the first social scientists, correct?
Yeah, that's right. The Institute was a spinoff of RAND in 1968, and it was all mathematicians, including Olaf Helmer, the inventor of the Delphi technique, and Paul Barron, who was one of the inventors of packet switching. So it was engineers and scientists. And I was the first social scientist added to the staff. It was such an exciting time. And it was like everything was bubbling and boiling. And, Xerox PARC was a hot zone. But in those days, kind of early 70s, Xerox PARC was mostly engineers and scientists, not so much social scientists. And actually, after John Seely Brown took over, it became a much richer mix of social and computer sciences and engineers. But it did take a while. The early days, it was driven by the technology, but this vision, amazing vision of connecting all these people and ultimately connecting through computing, that really is the beginning of the vision that we now call the metaverse. And what we've done at the Institute is try to keep this future back lens about 10 years out. And what we found is if you get your words right, it draws you toward the future. But if you get your words wrong, you kind of fight the future. So information superhighway, I think, was a bad term because it was modeling it on the highway system. And, the history was Al Gore kind of coined the term, and his father had developed the interstate highway system. So, why couldn't young Al do the information superhighway? But it was kind of unfortunate. Internet, I think, is a cool term and a really good one that drew us toward the future. World Wide Web was even better. I really like metaverse. I'm just concerned that it's gotten so commercialized so fast that it won't be branded, it won't be owned, but it should be expansive and it should keep drawing us toward that future of connectivity.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of commercialization, and I know that for a good number of years, many decades, in fact, the internet wasn't really a commercial endeavor, right? There was kind of a point that is interesting with the internet. I mean, that the metaverse is kind of entering a similar phase with right now. Is that in the late '90s, the internet saw the kind of commercialization and the .com boom and the bust, and similarly, right now we're seeing that kind of commercialization of virtual reality and the attempt to commercialize the metaverse as well. And we're seeing some pretty bullish investments kind of in the pets.com kind of realm, like people spending millions of dollars to buy virtual real estate and assets and NFTs. It's unclear if they'll have any value in a year or two. I'm wondering if you can kind of take us back to that point and really talk about that transition, pre-commercialization of the internet, and then as it emerged and how that transformed how you saw the future of the internet and how IFTF did.
Yeah, it's so important, and it's so interesting how it's going through these waves of commercialization. And my way of understanding Silicon Valley, and I grew up in Silicon Valley. I came in '73 before it was called that, and kind of grew up as a professional futurist in the Valley. And my way of understanding Silicon Valley, and I've written about this in my books, is it's like this extreme tension between people who want to make the world a better place, and there's still a lot of those people, and another kind of diaspora of people who are extremely greedy, extremely greedy. I mean, it's so greedy, it's hard for normal business people to even imagine how greedy they are. And I'm not being negative here. If they weren't so greedy, Silicon Valley would never work. It's this tension between the visionaries and the greedy people that creates energy and sparks, and you can feel it. You can feel it in the Valley. And that kind of forces the innovation, but it also creates a kind of spasmodic, kind of crazy element of it. And, the ARPANET began as classified. Only defense contractors could use it when we started using it. So in our early tests, we only worked with NASA and US Geological Survey and other defense contractors, universities. But then it became a kind of economy of gifts. Just a kind of give to get, what I think of as the reciprocity advantage, which is so powerful in Silicon Valley. It's just amazing how people are willing to give away ideas in the Valley in the faith that they'll get back even more in return. And I think that still continues. But then there's this tension when it all gets commercialized. And, I can remember, I have a vivid memory of the kind of Monday morning in the kind of economy of gifts version of the internet, the Monday morning when a couple of lawyers, a kind of seedy lawyers from Phoenix, as I recall, started selling courses on a Monday morning. And, oh, great offense. How could you do this? It's an economy of gifts. And 2 weeks later, everybody was doing it. and now we're in the cycle with the current version of the metaverse. It's becoming commercialized much quicker. And that, I think, is I think it's dangerous, but I also think it's just highly volatile because it's getting commercialized so soon. It took a very long time for the ARPANET becoming the internet, becoming the World Wide Web, and becoming more of a marketplace. That took a very long time. But with the current version of the metaverse, it's getting commercialized right away, which I think is going to lead to a real craziness, a potential risk factor, but also it could mean that things evolve much faster.
Interesting. Bob, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on this series is that there's just, as I mentioned, there's few people in the world that have been thinking about what the long-term futures of these distributed communication systems and technology-driven communication systems would be. I'm curious if you can also just take us back and tell us a little bit about how some of the forecasting and foresight methodologies were developed to try to understand the internet. I mean, obviously human beings have been thinking about the future for millennia, right? But IFTF's kind of special brand, what really did evolve with this specific type of distributed communication network. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how the methodologies of IFTF developed, and maybe even comment on what we might use today to try to understand the longer term implications of the metaverse?
Sure. And the common theme at the Institute has always been aggregating expert opinion about the future. And the first methodology was the Delphi technique developed by Olaf Helmer. And it's evolved over the years, but it still involves aggregating expert opinion. So the first question is, who are the experts at understanding the future? We've always been very cautious about celebrity because celebrity confuses expertise about the future. So generally, when we're looking for experts at understanding the future, we try to seek out people who are either not yet or don't want to be celebrities, because celebrities is just such a wild card in forecasting. But if you can find the expertise and then aggregate the expertise, and in the early days, it was more quantitative, and we've realized you can't do point predictions, and we gradually developed the foresight, insight, action cycle, where our role is to provoke insight, the kind of aha, the stories you can't get out of your mind once you have them, to provoke insight using external, outside in foresight, and aggregating expert opinion from around the world to do that. So the foresight, insight, action cycle is kind of the essence of what we do, beginning with prepare your mind, and then moving to the stories from the future, not predictions, but provocations designed to provoke insight. And the way we get evaluated isn't can you predict the future, it's can you provoke better decisions in the present. And that art, I think, has evolved dramatically over the last 50 years and more. So I think we need to apply the same thing, that notion of foresight, insight, action, that notion of future back to the metaverse, which I think it's good language. I actually like the language. If we can somehow kind of step out of the commercialization or the attempted ownership of the metaverse into what's the spectrum of possibility, and then use that foresight in this foresight, insight, action way, and get at that tension between making the world a better place, which we urgently need to do, and the need to make money to sustain it, kind of beyond the greed element. And that, to me, I'm really optimistic about.
That's great. And I'm curious, again, looking back on just, I know we it's not about predicting, but it is always interesting to kind of see, look back at our previous forecasts. I'm kind of curious, looking back on our IFTS previous forecasts about the internet and potentially the metaverse and virtual reality. What kind of surprised you the most about the development of the internet, and what things happened faster or slower than you thought they would?
Yeah. So I think that the big surprise to me is how long it's taken. I mean, it just seemed obvious to me, and it was very obvious to Doug Engelbart, what we needed to do to connect the world and kind of create augmentation of human intelligence. The opportunities seem so obvious. And just one simple example, email, which we all kind of scoff at nowadays, but email is one of the few things that actually does connect cross-platform. So it has a value. It's just you can easily misuse it. Email took a very long time to happen. And we actually had social media, what we'd call social media or collaborative media. We had that before we had email. On the ARPANET and early IBM systems, Procter & Gamble had 35,000 people connected through a social media platform called ION before they had email. And it was very controversial for P&G people to put email addresses on their business cards because it was viewed as an internal thing in those days. But I think, so to me, that it's surprising to me it's taken so long to do such things that are so obvious. We were too optimistic and too positive in our forecasts. I think we didn't explore the negatives deeply enough, and I think the risks around connectivity were not explored early enough. If I had it to do over again, we would have done more negative scenarios early. The thing we got right, way ahead of others, was seeing that the ARPANET and the internet was for people communicating with people. When we did this panel in 1972, I have this vivid memory. It's my first professional paper. And I'm saying, oh, wouldn't it be great to connect people through the network? And we could do online questionnaires and have lots of interaction. And this young man stands up in the back of the room, and he's so angry at us. He's angry at the whole panel. And he says, the use of the ARPANET for people communicating with people is a misuse of CPU. And he stormed out of the room. This is my first professional paper. Give me a break. And
wow.
But I think he was right. It was a misuse of CPU, the way the ARPANET was originally envisioned, because it was a network for data communications, and the network resources were scarce. So it's taken us a long time to figure out what are the things, what's the clarity of direction. And we need to do that again with metaverse. What's the clarity? What's the clarity of direction that we're seeking? And then we have to be very flexible about how we execute, how we create, how we make the future.
Yeah, it's such a great point about this, the amount of time things take. I mean, one of the things we like to point out is that, personal computers were around for 30 years before normal people wanted them. And again, we pointed out that the pivot point was when people could have email, where they could actually be communicating with each other.
Yeah.
And the other reason I mentioned, I really love Matthew Ball's Metaverse Primer that we put the link up to here, is he breaks it down, and it really helps you understand like that this is, people often think, oh, it's going to be one device or one service that's going to really transform everything, and also one innovator, one singular innovator that's going to be the person that changes the world. And really it's a collection of big and small changes, and specifically it's an ecosystem of changes. It's not just technological innovation. You can have technology. Thomas Edison invented, electricity. It wasn't for another several decades that factories were able to actually like use that electricity. I mean, the first thing he did was put electric lights in, but they were, heavily, invested in the previous ways of doing things, and all of the human organizations and kind of ways of doing things are, there's a lot of friction there. There's a lot of momentum. So
Yes.
those kind of changes really take a long time. And then of course, when things get commercialized, we have this kind of tension between the marketing departments telling us this one device or this service is going to change everything tomorrow or the next day. But really it's there's going to be a lot of starts and stops, a lot of twists and turns. It's going to be, a wild and crazy ride in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, I know one of the themes that you've been thinking about for a long time and writing about for a long time is the future of work. And I know that you're working on a new book right now. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that book and how the metaverse kind of works into that.
Yes. So our new effort's called Office Shock. It's kind of a play on this 1970s book called Future Shock that Alvin Toffler, who was actually on the advisory committee for the Institute when it was formed. But the notion is we've had this shock that's been created by COVID that's forced change in how we work and even why we work. So we're now taking a future back look, looking at the next blob on the horizon. Maybe it's not just the metaverse, it's the office verse. How do we think about the metaverse as applied to work? So it's offices in the sense of buildings, but officing in the sense of how we work. So we're using full spectrum thinking and applying it to the future of the office, and asking, why do we office at all? What are the outcomes we're seeking? What are the impacts on climate and otherwise? How will we augment human intelligence as we work together? How do we choose who to work with? And how do we kind of increase the inclusion and the belongingness of people as we work together? The choice of where and when we work will be critical, but it isn't going to be just a simple, let's go back to the office. It's going to be, how do we work together? How do we improve how we work and how we live together going forward? And how do we create agility? I think of it as we're moving from economies of scale, where bigger was always better, to economies of organization. What I call shape-shifting organizations, what Stan McChrystal calls team of teams. And the metaverse, the office-verse, is a place we can do that. And we're going to hear in this very program, we're going to hear from one of the early prototypes of somebody doing that, of using the metaverse to apply it to a real business and creating a kind of office-verse to make the future a better place, but also to create ways of making a living, ways of working that are better for people, can be more productive and be better experiences for people.
Yeah, one of the forecasts that really has influenced me a lot over the years from you has been on this idea that in order to have virtual collaboration space, it's got to be better than being there. Right? It's got to be better than being there.
Right.
And of course, that better calculus has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. If being there means I might actually contract a deadly virus. And so we've seen this boon to remote work, and now we're starting to see more experiments and more investments and more actual developments in this remote virtual workspaces, both
yes, and
Facebook as well. So
And it's so exciting. I mean, this is really a great opportunity over the next decade to remake the whole notion of making a living. And you're right, the early days of tech has focused on almost horseless carriage thinking, as if we could somehow simulate face-to-face meetings in a virtual world. That's just not the way to think about it. Instead of thinking about how do we simulate face-to-face, think about what are the needs, what are the human needs, what are the work needs, and how can we create an environment where people can make choices of which medium is good for what, and we can create environments that are actually better than being there. And the metaverse creates this really open opportunity for us to not just simulate in person, but do something better. And I do think our colleague David Peskovitz has said that the more virtual we become, the more we'll value in-person experiences. And I think he's right that the in-person is still going to be important, but the metaverse, if it plays out the way I hope it will, we're going to have options to do things we couldn't do in person and do that even better.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to Office Shock and really appreciate you coming in and chatting. I always appreciate that. This is a perfect segue. As you mentioned, we're going to actually talk to somebody now inside of the metaverse who is a
Great.
CEO who's spending his entire work days in the metaverse for an entire year. So we'll say goodbye to you for right now, Bob, and we're going to transition to our next segment. Let's see.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bob. So some of you might have seen this recent signal from Bill Gates, who put out his annual kind of prediction notes. And he said, Bill Gates says that he predicts that most meetings will move to the metaverse within 3 years. And it's unclear if that's happening. But what is clear is that there's some early adopters. And today we have a very special guest, sometimes referred to as the CEO of the metaverse, Bruno Larval. He is the CEO and founder of Larval, and Larval is a company that's been providing data solutions to the pharma and biotech industry since 2004. And Bruno is leading Larval team creating data solutions, and he's doing this exclusively from virtual reality for 1 year. And Bruno is a Kellogg Business School alum. He's worked at IBM, Lehman Brothers, and in the biotech space. And Bruno is really focused on leveraging new technology to deliver data insights. It's not a virtual reality company, though. I do want to point that out. And Bruno has mostly been using Spatial, which is a collaboration environment for VR. What's really a couple of things that are really powerful about Spatial is that you don't have to be in VR to visit somebody in Spatial. Today, we're going to metacast him in through a tab. Let's see if I can pull this forward here. And let's see, you should be seeing this. Let me unmute myself. Let me unmute Bruno.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now, Bruno?
Hi. I can hear you perfectly, yes.
Great. And can someone in the chat tell me, can you hear Bruno? I just want to make sure. One of the challenging things about this kind of metacasting. Oh, great. Okay, so everyone can hear you in. Okay. Fantastic. So just so people understand what you're looking at here, I have just a normal Chrome browser tab opened on my desktop. I've opened up my Spatial account, and I'm able to just navigate in here. I can look around the space. This is our IFTF demo space. Oh, hi, Suzanne. That's Suzanne's our in VR producer. We've got a 3D scan of our desk here, and we've been hosting some events in here. And let's see, oops. So I'm just basically kind of navigating around here like you would a video game experience. Let's see, sorry, I'm not a very good video gamer. All right, let's see, there we go. And just so you can get a sense, Spatial is basically, I'm gonna just play this little video here. Spatial is a collaboration tool where you're able to go into and join through an avatar, and you can have whiteboards. You're able to bring in things like your Google Docs or your MS 365 documents. You can share stickies, you can share videos, all sorts of assets. And this is one of the things that sets this platform apart from others. Is one of the things we like to say in the EML is that all forms of virtual reality and augmented reality are some some form of data visualization with spatial tracking. And a lot of why it doesn't seem very valuable is that a lot of the data that we're seeing in VR and AR experiences is just kind of fantasy entertainment data. And this, what's great about spatial is it actually allows us to bring in data that's relevant to our daily lives. So anyway, so that's our little overview. Let me just say hello here to Bruno. Welcome, Bruno. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Toshi. Hi.
Hi. So, so I told folks a little bit about you and your company, but tell us a little bit more. So you have decided to spend an entire year running your company from inside of virtual reality. Can you tell us, first of all, what that means? And the second of all, why are you doing this?
Yeah, and first I want to tell you that interview was terrific. I loved it. And if I ever get fired from being the CEO of the Metaverse, I will apply for a job with you and Bob. This is terrific what you're doing there. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, fantastic. We'd love to have you.
Larval, thank you. So Larval is a software and data company in healthcare. So we're developing the Google Map for cancer. And we're very excited about it. We've got 150 people. And what is, I would say, what was unique about us is that for 17 years, we were 100% remote, 150 people, all working remotely. My VP of operation and I worked together 12 years. We never met a single time. So we felt spatial.
Can I just pause you? Can I just pause you?
Met.
Could you speak up
Yes.
a little bit? People are having a little bit of challenge hearing you. If you don't.
Oh, certainly.
Thank you.
Yes. Is it better now? I'm going to try to speak up a little bit.
Yes.
So,
people are, yeah, hopefully it'll be louder. Yeah.
I'm going to try to speak up. Is that better?
Let's see.
Okay. So my company I felt special because we were all working remotely.
There, I fixed
my
it.
VP and I worked 12 years. We never met in person. And now came the pandemic, and then everybody did it, which is wonderful, but we felt less special. And then we realized that there is something else that was missing in our life, and it's a place to meet. And so I decided to experiment with the metaverse, and it was such a great experiment that we decided to be the first company run completely from the metaverse. So we bought a headset for most people in the company, and I decided to make it into a real experiment myself, to lock myself in the metaverse for 1 year. So tomorrow will be day 150. And it's been an incredible experience. So no email, no meeting in person for business, and no Zoom. So all of my Zoom are done as an avatar, right? And that has been an incredible, but sometimes hard, by the way, experiment for us.
Yeah, I'd love to get more into that, but maybe before we do that, can we head over to one of your virtual spaces? I think we've got a portal over here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Let's go.
We're going to teleport to the Larval Lounge. Let's see here. It might take a moment to load this in. Stand by, everyone. Okay, let's see. So slowly, again, this is all happening just through my normal web browser. And one of the cool things about Spatial is you can join from VR headset and
Toshi,
AR
can you still hear me?
headset, mobile. Yes, can you hear me?
There we are.
Great.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I know you have just a regular office, but this is kind of your employee or community lounge space.
It is.
Can you take us on a little tour?
Of course, absolutely. Let's go this way across. So this is actually where we had our holiday party. So you had 150 people joining here, some of them in spillover room, because there's only room for 30 or 40 people, maybe 50 now. And we also use it for conference. So when there's a conference, we invite our customers in the different pods to talk about different products. So it's a bit of a demo lounge or exhibit hall, if you will. In these domes, we can have meetings with different customers to demo different products. And here at the end, and you can see some Christmas decoration left from the party, we have a bit of an arena where we can have some social activity. So we even, in one of our meetups, we we did hide an Eiffel Tower. You can hear a little French accent in me. We did hide an Eiffel Tower behind one of the rocks, and we had a bit of a scavenger hunt for the party, and that was a lot of fun. So this is an extension of our office, the Sky Lounge, and my colleague Mark Grambling, who's helping me build the Google Map for Cancer, is joining us here. He's a fan of designing, in addition to being PhD in cancer biology. He became a fan at designing furniture in the metaverse. He's a Roche Bobois of the metaverse. He designed a lot of stuff all the time.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you.
So that's Mark Grambling.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
So
Yes, I got interested in designing when I should have been working, right, Bruno?
So you were, Mark, your job, you weren't hired as a metaverse developer or VR developer for this company, but you found that this is something that you got interested in doing and exploring, and it became basically a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, Bruno and I started working together probably about 8 years ago. And I've been, in fully remote for, a decade or so. And it just seemed like a really new, interesting angle on doing all of that. And yeah, just sort of became a hobbyist about it. I like sort of building things. So I used to sort of do wood carving and have little hobbies like that. And I found you could do that from the comfort of your own home, sitting at your desk. So explore. I'm still fully an amateur, but it just became something I enjoyed doing. So,
one of the forecasts we talk about sometimes is this idea of world building being something that young people are kind of being raised to do inside of Minecraft, and that what they're really building is long-term simulation literacies, the ability to basically use these simulation tools, and they're going to bring those into their lives and work later on. I've got some requests in the chat here. People want to see some more of your designs. I'm wondering, actually, Bruno, can we actually go to your office space? Can you throw up a portal and we can chat there for a minute?
Of course.
I think because you have some things.
Of course. And I'm actually gonna open Mark's office, because I have to admit it's nicer than mine, which is a source of tension at times. So I end up making a lot of meetings in his office. So let me open the portal for Mark's office, and we'll go there.
Great.
Is it okay, Mark? Too late
I
again.
guess it better be too late.
Did you
now.
clean your
I'll see you
office?
over
All
there.
right. You got
I hope you don't have anything
unexpected
embarrassing
guests.
there, but we'll see.
Let's see here. Oops. Okay, travel to Mark's office. I'm seeing in the chat, why do people have no legs? So, that's one of the interesting. So in VR, we're not walking around yet. I mean, there are some full body tracking systems, but for the most part right now, we just track heads and hands. So most VR avatar systems do not show legs at this point. And one of the things that's very unique and different about VR is how we move about, because, you're typically in a real room, you're not able, you can walk around a little bit, but you can't walk forever. And so teleporting is one of the main ways of locomotion. So because of that, most platforms have actually eliminated legs. Part of it is just a design aspect, because we're not able to track those legs right now. Some have added some kind of inverse kinematics kind of simulation of legs, but it's just become a design norm in here. Just kind of like something like www becomes a design norm for locations.
I think I'm still maybe rendering to I mentioned to you that I've got my Sorbonne professor who's following me. He's a psychologist, and he's following our experiment, and he's very disturbed by the body integrity issue that comes with these avatars with no legs. And of course, the point is we don't need it to teleport, and legs have limited expressive value for most people. So that's the argument. But he's studying that from the perspective of maybe it's not good for our brain to get used to seeing us walking around with no legs.
Yeah.
So we'll see. He might write a paper.
Even in Zoom, when I've only met somebody on Zoom and then I finally meet them in person, I say, "Oh, you have legs." Okay, so it looks like this is Mark's office, and he's got a lot of
Mark's
objects
office
that are still loading. Let's see, for me, I don't quite see quite everything yet. So while that's loading, let's just chat for a little bit. Talk us through, okay, so what is a day like for you, and how are you using virtual reality? How are you interacting with
Sure.
both your internal team as
Yeah.
well as external partners or potentially even employees?
Sure. So this morning, before this, I had 4 calls in the metaverse, 4 meetings in the metaverse. We had essentially a sprint session for our product day. We had a strategy meeting with a couple of colleagues. We had a 15-minute party in my office for someone's promotion. So we invited people who got promoted. We had a little party. We took a selfie of the party, and we posted it now on social media. So these are ways for us to feel connected, to feel that we are a real team, as opposed to being pictures on Zoom all over the world, right? So a sense of empathy at the end of the day, a sense of being in the same spaceship, even if it's a virtual spaceship. So all of these meetings took place this morning, half of them in spatial, half of them on Facebook workroom environment. So we do right now, we use these 2 platforms for different things. Certainly for the functionality of just a work meeting, we find that workroom has some advantages. It's easier to share, and we're all on a conference room. It's a little bit easier. But for more casual meetings or social event or just impromptu meeting, we really like spatial. So that's essentially what we had. Now with customers, it's a little bit different. For external call, I used to essentially have Zoom calls because many people are not on the metaverse yet, and I would pipe in my metaverse avatar. And then over the last week or so, Toshi, I mentioned that to you, I started to have doubts because I got a comment on Glassdoor of someone we interviewed who was complaining because she said, I was interviewed by a cartoon. She didn't get the job. Maybe she was a little bit upset at that too. But I was interviewed by a cartoon. And so now I'm a little bit more careful externally because I understand the disconnect of having one avatar meeting with a Zoom video might create negative feelings and a little bit of an imbalance in some ways. So externally, I'm trying to be more conscious of that. And that's a recent realization that I had.
Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, I'm curious, and if you folks have questions for Bruno, please put them in the chat. We'll probably have time for 1 or 2. I see some of the questions are questions we're going to be answering in other episodes of this Metaverse series, but specifically questions for Bruno would be great right now. Bruno, my last question for you is, what has been the best thing about this commitment to spend a year in the Metaverse, and what has been the hardest thing?
Okay. So for me, the best thing has been relationship with people in my team, and building camaraderie, trust, empathy with Zoom is hard. Now, I spent my career doing it for 17 years, so it's feasible, but it's hard. And now that I can get together in a place, joke around, walk around a virtual lake, and it creates a very different relationship with my team members. So the camaraderie, the sense of being a single team, really changed the relationship with a number of senior people in my team. And that's wonderful, wonderful. The tougher thing is a very practical thing for me. And it is the fact that headset on my forehead is heavy. After 5 hours, it irritates my forehead. I changed from the foam to the softer material. And this morning, one of my colleagues said, well, Bruno, I'm not going in avatar. I'm staying from outside because my forehead is starting to be irritated, right? So to me, the biggest need is a lighter headset that does not irritate my forehead. So something very, very simple, but the technology is going to evolve so quickly. Now, one more thing that is a worth saying. Our avatar are deep into the valley of uncanny, right? It's too much reality or not enough. Mark looks okay, but I look like an old zombie here, and my hat is not rendered. So We want either more reality, like a deep fake of my face, or less reality, more cartoon, like on Horizon, right? Or on maybe Altspace VR. But spatial is deep into the valley of uncanny right now.
And obviously, you guys are very early adopters. I mean, this is still quite awkward and primitive and challenging. Do you have any sort of forecasts around what do you believe that other organizations are going to start to do this themselves as well? And if so, do you have any sense of like how long that might take?
Well, and Bob made so many great points, including timing and enthusiasm and hype and the cycle of greed and excitement about changing the world. That was fascinating. I don't want to sound it like bragging, but I think that unless you have a leader in an organization who's as, I would say, obsessed as I am with the metaverse, it's going to be very hard for a traditional organization to move into the metaverse. And unless the CEO say, I'm going to always be on the metaverse, hybrid model are going to move toward less and less metaverse because it's hard. It's like hybrid model. It's very hard to be hybrid. So unless you have a CEO who's so obsessed with being essentially the CEO of the metaverse, I think it's going to be a long, long time. It's going to happen more with young people gaming and playing around. But in the corporate world, events, yes. So some of our pharma customers are interested in organizing symposium or advisory board meetings in the metaverse. So events, yes. But in terms of really making it the main place you work or live, it's going to take a long time, in my opinion. Mark, I don't know if you have a different view on that, but I think we're still extremely early. We are in 95 for the internet, for the web, perhaps.
That's far back. Mark, your room is starting to load here, by the way. I'm curious if there's anything you want to show us that
Yeah,
it's quite beautiful.
It can be slow on the web app. So yeah, I've built a few offices. This is my main one. And I the short story is wanted to make it a little bit personal to sort of reflect some of the stuff that's hanging up in my
I see some photos over here.
Physical office. So yeah, I've got a photo of Bruno and I think we actually have met in person, which is sort of a rarity in our company. But that was the two of us. I think we're in New York City there. And this is a little tribute. It's a little model of Don Quixote. So that's a tribute to Bruno because he sort of has that personality of being the Don Quixote of the metaverse. Mm-hmm. And just trying to make it a bit personal as a place to be and a place I meet Bruno most of the time in here. And I think I'll second Bruno's point. I think there's also just practicalities to be had for companies to move into the metaverse, improving screen share and improving speed. As maybe people are seeing on the screen that there's some slowness of a browser versus being in a headset. So I think I think those are near-term solutions for the technology to move forward. And I'm a guitar player, so I have to have I download these models and skin them, free models that I find online and put them in my office. And I always tell Bruno not to touch stuff in my office, so I'm going to put this back where
he's a little particular. He's very sensitive about his digital object, right? They say that teenagers, the digital objects are more important for them than real. Same with Mark. So he's very sensitive about it. And this is, by the way, the Google map of cancer that Mark and his team are building. So we can navigate the data. You can get inside the data, of course, or we can put the data back on the shelf.
I'm just looking here in the chat, guys, and actually some people have already signed up in Spatial and creating their own office. Any advice for folks that want to start experimenting in Spatial about how to get started? Any tips or tricks? Any pro tricks?
The best way to start out is push all the buttons with your avatar hands to learn where everything is. And the best place that's the funnest place to start is find the search bar where you can type or talk and see what types of objects are loaded in Spatial in their library that they just have inbound. And it's a great way to start learning how to put things into space and explore. So I definitely recommend playing with the search. That's how I started. I discovered the search button, and then I couldn't stop myself. And then I learned other websites and other things in terms of how to find and source material to add. So that would be my advice.
And then
Practical, if you
push
will.
the limit and try to upload so many polygons, right, these objects to crash the place. Mark did it a few times. I think he nearly cried each time because of all the objects that he built, and then he lost everything. So you're not a real metaverse builder unless you crash the place by loading it with too many polygons, I think.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the experience. Thanks for that, Bruno.
Well, I know you guys are engaged, you're constantly changing what you're doing here and developing, and we're excited to keep doing this. And in fact, what I would love to do is actually hold an event inside of Spatial with you, not just streaming into Zoom, but actually invite some folks. We have more folks in our community and on our staff now in VR, so we'd love to start doing more of those, and we plan to do that in the coming year. We believe that it's really important for people to have heads-in, hands-on experiences to really understand what these embodied experiences are really like. So excited to come back. Oh, you can see here, you guys are seeing my webcam. So this is one of the ways that you can see join in. So I think we're going to say goodbye to you right now. If folks want to follow your journey, Bruno, what's the best way? Do you have a hashtag on Twitter?
Yes. So find me on Twitter, Bruno Larvol, CEO of the Metaverse. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
Fantastic.
Any social media.
Fantastic. Well, Bruno and Mark, thank you so much. We hope to visit you again, maybe in full immersion next time. And everybody from the Zoom says hello to you as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Toshi. That was wonderful. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you, Toshi.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're just wrapping up here. I want to thank our guests, Bob Johansen and Bruno Larvol. I want to thank our producers, Julie Erickson and Suzanne Forchheimer, who have helped behind the scenes make this all happen. Also want to put some plugs in if you're interested in learning more about IFTF and our other public-facing and membership and partnership opportunities. You can check out Vantage. We'll paste those links into the chat as well. We've got, you can partner with IFTF through Vantage. We've got this event coming on January 12th, so that's tomorrow. So you can learn about the Vantage program. And then we also have a bunch of IFTF Foresight Essentials, our training program. So you can learn about IFTF on January 19th, IFTF Foresight Essentials. We've got a Foresight talk coming up on January 24th. And we've got a Foresight talk coming up on the 31st. And Foresight for Beginners, one of our Fast Futures courses in February 3rd, if you just want to do a quick dive and just get a sense of what our tool sets are like. And we're pasting this information in the chat. Also, just the best way to stay in touch with us is to subscribe to our newsletter, and that's how you can find out everything IFTF related. So thank you all again, and we'll be looking forward. We'll be announcing the next episode of the Metaverse Perspective series, where we'll be answering a lot of the questions that we saw in the Q&A and the chat today. There's certainly many topics, and thank you all for joining us. And thanks again, Bob.